The Cats Go to Market by Joan E. Cass, illustrated by William Stobbs. To my darling bar, with love. It was a day of sunshine and rain. One moment the sky was a hazy blue. The next, heavy dark clouds appeared, as if from nowhere, and the rain spilled down. One moment the ripples on the river moved and sparkled like silver and gold thread. The next, the water heaved, sullen and brown, under a lowering sky. Riverview Road was at its busiest, for it was market day. Since early morning, stall owners had been arriving in various vehicles or pushing handcarts. They trundled and roared past number 11, the Cedars, past number 10, the Lilacs, past Mr. Humber's garage, and the fish and chip shop. Then along to a stretch of ground by the river where everyone arranged their stalls and put out their wares. Up the river from the sea came the fishing boats, loaded with fresh seafood, baskets of fat brindled crabs, sprawling long-clawed lobsters, sand-brown shrimps, mackerel, mullet, herring, and sole. The market was bustling and noisy. Some stalls were stacked with fruits and vegetables, some were draped with bright materials, and many others were piled with china, kitchenware, toys, groceries, and junk. The cats who lived on Riverview Road loved market days. Arabella, the alley cat who had found a home among the old cars in Mr. Humber's garage, usually managed to find something tasty for her two kittens, Susie and Sweetie. Ginger Moll, from the fish shop, liked to wander sedately through the stalls. She did not need any extra food, but she liked to be seen and admired. Esmeralda, who lived in the corn merchant's cellar, was lean, black, and wispy-eared, and was not averse to a portion of fish or a few shrimps. The 5 flipping little tabbies from Bill Briggs's houseboat, the Gypsy Queen, he always called them my flipping little tabbies, and their companion Toasty, the tailless Manx kitten, were generally locked in the galley on market days to keep them out of mischief. But they adored noise and bustle, and almost always managed to escape. Kitty Cat, the tatty little kitten from the Seahorse, came with them. No one bothered about her. On this particular morning, the cats were walking through the market together. The rain had stopped, and a watery sun shone overhead. The streets were crowded. Children played, men and women with large baskets jostled one another, and the stall owners shouted out their wares. The cats stopped in front of the fish stall. Mrs. Matilda Gubbins was cutting up fish. She was large and fat and wore a dirty blue apron. She didn't like cats. When she saw them all eyeing her and her fish, she shook her knife at them. "Scram!" she shouted. "Scram, you thieving, crafty, artful, sly, designing, cunning, useless creatures." The cats took no notice. "A thoroughly ignorant, disagreeable woman," muttered Ginger Moll. "No manners at all," exclaimed Kitty Cat. "She just doesn't understand us," said Arabella plaintively. Esmeralda's flattened tail grew quite bushy with indignation. "She should be turned out of the market immediately," she said. The 5 little tabbies and Toasty looked down their noses in a very superior way, but didn't say a word. Mrs. Matilda Gubbins served a customer with a nice fillet of cod. "Fresh from the sea this morning, love," she said in a sugary, sweet voice. Suddenly, on the ground at the side of the stall, Esmeralda spotted a couple of fat, juicy fish heads, of no use to anyone but a self-respecting cat. Arabella, too, saw something tempting. Hanging over the stall was the tail of a fish. Obviously, it must have a nice, plump body. Stretching up, Arabella gave it the gentlest, tiniest tweak with her paw. The fish slid off the stall and dropped with a soft plop to the ground. In a moment, the 5 little tabbies, who were just greedy, and Arabella, who was hungry, were stuffing themselves with juicy morsels of fish. But Mrs. Matilda Gubbins had been watching them out of the corner of her eye, and as soon as she saw them eating the fish, she pounced. "You thieving, crafty, artful, sly, designing, cunning, useless creatures," she shouted. Then before the cats had time to blink, she ran around the stall and scooped up the 5 little tabbies, Arabella, and even poor little Kitty Cat, who hadn't done a thing. She dumped them all into a large packing case and slammed down the lid. "You stay there," she said, "and when I have a minute, I'll drop you all in the river, and that will be the end of you." The cats were furious. The packing case was partly filled with bits of newspaper, cabbage stalks, and potato peelings. It was most unpleasant, and it smelled horrible. "Oh dear, will she really drop us in the river?" asked Arabella, who couldn't swim. "Certainly not," piped up the 5 little tabbies. "Bill Briggs would have her sent to prison. We have a perfect right to walk through the market, how and when we please," said Kitty Cat, who had done nothing. "But what can we do now?" moaned Arabella. Meanwhile, Esmeralda and Ginger Moll made off as quickly as they could, and Toasty hurried off to find Bill Briggs. No one would dare to harm his 5 little tabbies if he were about. Then it began to rain again, large drops falling in the packing case, and it became chilly. There was a great bustle and uproar outside as umbrellas went up and people hurried to find shelter. The imprisoned cats scuffled about, making as much noise as they could to attract attention. Suddenly, something moved under their feet. "A mouse! A mouse! A real live mouse!" mewed the 5 little tabbies, bursting with excitement. They began to scratch among the paper and rubbish in the packing case. There was such a to-do that Mrs. Matilda Gubbins put down her umbrella and gingerly lifted the lid to see what was going on. Kitty Cat had just caught the mouse and was holding it very carefully in her mouth. All the cats heard the lid as Mrs. Matilda Gubbins opened it and peered in. In a split second, they all sprang and leaped out in a terrific scramble and scurry and ran for their lives. Mrs. Matilda Gubbins ran too, brandishing her umbrella. "Out of my way," she shouted. "I'm after those thieving, crafty, artful, sly, designing, cunning, useless cats." Everyone looked about in surprise. What was happening? The 5 little tabbies followed Kitty Cat, running in and out of the crowd, around a lamppost, under a handcart, and over a pile of boxes and baskets. Mrs. Gubbins followed. Arabella deftly dived into a junk stall and crouched behind a pile of old magazines. Suddenly, Kitty Cat dropped the mouse. Plop! With a delighted squeak, the mouse turned and ran straight at Mrs. Matilda Gubbins. She saw it coming and jumped up in the air like an exploding firework, shouting at the top of her voice, "Help! Help! Fire! Police! Ambulance!" There was great excitement. Everyone thought there must be a bank robbery or a fire. Then, seeing the state Mrs. Matilda Gubbins was in, someone offered her a chair, into which she sank, and brought her a glass of water. The mouse vanished like magic. Then Bill Briggs suddenly appeared with Toasty on his shoulder. He was striding along and whistling "A Life on the Ocean Wave." When he saw Mrs. Matilda Gubbins looking flustered and angry, he took off his cap politely. "And how are you today?" he asked. "Have you by any chance seen my 5 flipping little tabbies? I seem to have mislaid them." "I believe I saw them a few minutes ago," said Mrs. Matilda Gubbins with a peculiar expression on her face. At that moment, the 5 little tabbies and Kitty Cat appeared from behind some boxes. They glared spitefully at Mrs. Matilda Gubbins. "Well, well, well," said Bill Briggs, "my 5 flipping little tabbies. I don't know what I'd do if I lost them. I hope you've been behaving yourselves. Time for supper, and I've a lovely bit of salmon." Then he strode away with the cats meekly following. Mrs. Matilda Gubbins shook her fist at them as they went. "Cats," she said, "cats. They'll be the death of me." Meanwhile, Arabella had sneaked back to the fish stall, eaten a nice bit of fish, and snatched some for Susie and Sweetie's supper. The end.